I'm Richard Gisbert. You're at The Listening Post. This week, Mexico. The media pinned down in a war over drugs. U.S. comedians take on business journalism.
You knew what the banks were doing, and yet were touting it for months and months. The entire network was.
And the Israeli arms industry goes Bollywood.
I need to feel safe and sheltered, security and protection.
Welcome back. First, we report on a war that claimed more than 6,000 lives last year. It's turned an underreported country into one of the world's most dangerous places to report from. This is not about Iraq, Somalia, or Sri Lanka. It's Mexico. It's a story you probably haven't heard much about, and no wonder. Since the year 2000, 45 journalists have been killed there, and there are few reporters left willing to risk working the story. Our starting point: drugs, politics, and what's left of journalism in Mexico.
For weeks, the world has watched as the violence across our southern border in Mexico has escalated at an alarming rate.
This week ended with one of the highest violent crime levels in the history of Mexico.
The executions that happen every day are due to the restructuring of the cartels.
The Mexican side of the border is essentially a war zone.
Mexico's wave of violence is part of a civil war between security services and drug cartels, both out to assert their authority. This journalist was caught in the middle of a gun battle in Reynosa involving federal agents and suspected drug traffickers. He survived, others have not.
A crime reporter in the U.S.-Mexico border city of Ciudad Juarez, the current epicenter of drug cartel turf wars, was shot to death outside his home.
In 2006, Brad Will, an American journalist, was filming an anti-government rally in the border town of Oaxaca when he was shot and killed. His camera was still rolling. Yet Will is only one of 45 journalists to have fallen in the last 8 years of Mexico's drug war.
The drug cartels have now become much more influential in various parts of the country, so the spread for journalists also has spread to more central states like Michoacan. They have had bombs thrown at their offices, they've had threatening phone calls, they've had journalists disappear. So many people are not aware of what is going on or how this affects their day-to-day life in a democratic country.
The fear factor is affecting all kinds of Mexican institutions: health, security, and the media.
The police chief of one of Mexico's most violent cities has been forced to quit after gunmen warned they would continue to kill his colleagues unless he resigned.
Mexico has once again become the site of a mass murder. 17 bodies have appeared in the northern city of Tijuana. 12 of the bodies were discovered gagged and sustained gunshot wounds to the head.
You have paramedics too afraid to get out of their van to treat somebody who may not be dead yet. Police who simply refuse to arrive. And you have a photographer who's too afraid to get out of his car to take a photo.
This fear among journalists that their coverage might make them the next target of the cartels means that they are taking on more measures to protect themselves. Often, it's the journalism that suffers.
Some media have now taken on tactics of not signing articles with specific names anymore, but there's still some helplessness, I think, amongst the media on what to do and how to react to this spike in violence.
Some media are starting to say anything related to drug trafficking, corruption, and things like that, we're going to take from the press release from the police, what the police says about that.
But what is President Felipe Calderón and his government's role when it comes to protecting their media? Is it simply an inability to provide protection against the drug cartels?
You've reported that the number of drug cartels, the people in these drug gangs, could outnumber soon the soldiers in Mexico.
Or are they partly responsible for this climate of violence?
Owing to the capacity of the drug cartels to reorganize and infiltrate institutions, the Mexican government is at a huge disadvantage for winning this war.
I think there's a lack of conviction of the protection that we deserve as journalists to do our job, and I think it has also been affected by the institution that's supposed to be dedicated to addressing crimes against journalists and helping the victims.
Despite the government capture of important drug trafficking kingpins in 2008, the ongoing infiltration of security institutions shows that the economic capacity of organized crime is the biggest challenge to overcome.
The levels of corruption at the local police, the local prosecutor's office, it's just too much in order to investigate. It's really just ridiculous for them, for the government to self-investigate himself.
But while the drug war might be a no-go area for journalists south of the border, the U.S. media are certainly picking up on the story and delivering it with their own very distinct slant.
It is a nation that is on the verge of collapse, and we Americans are already in grave danger because of it.
What's going on there, and how big of a national security threat is this for the U.S.?
Those are simply the television stations who still bother to write about or report on the border. This is not even addressing the number of newspapers and television stations that have simply left the border region alone. It's a story bigger than them, it's too expensive. It's also somewhat dangerous. The result is less information.
The relationship between journalists, the government, and the cartels is complicated, and there is no sign it is likely to change.
You think that it's just part of historic impunity that we live in Mexico, this damaged system, this weak democracy that won't ever be a democracy if it doesn't respect the freedom of expression. So, you just think it's part of your job, and you keep doing your job, because really you have one objective, to publish a story and to denounce something. And this is an object that we shouldn't forget.
Faced with intimidation, corruption, and danger, telling the truth about the Mexican drug trade will continue to put reporters in the crossfire. But if they give up, then the real story of this hidden war will go untold. Here's how our Global Village voices see the news media and Mexico.
Organized crime has directly affected journalism by putting fear into the journalists, by murdering many of them, and of course, by bombing many of the buildings that they work in. Ultimately, the drug cartels have helped to bring about a major behavioral shift in Mexican culture today. 10 years ago, Mexicans would be able to trust each other and trust strangers to be communal and to be with each other. Now these days, people cannot trust one another, and that community vibe is gone.
Mexico's current situation is almost the same situation Colombia has been facing for the last 15 or 20 years. And media is not an exception. Self-censorship, financial constraints, death threats from illegal groups or mafias, even harassment from some government officials against those journalists who want to go beyond the statements issued by authorities. And that causes a media blackout on some major issues.
Anyone looking to be one of our Global Village voices can either email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net or just go on Facebook and look for the Listening Post page. You can also follow us on Twitter. We'll let you know via Facebook and Twitter what stories we're working on and how you can get with the program and contribute to our broadcast. It's time now for Listening Post News Bites. Pakistan's information minister, Sherry Rahman, has resigned her post in protest over the government's clampdown on the media. The minister quit following a cabinet meeting when a leading broadcaster, GOTV, was blocked in several major cities around the country. Journalists took to the streets in Abbottabad in protest over the ban, and the International Federation of Journalists accused President Asif Ali Zardari of intolerable interference in press freedom. The development came only a few weeks after GOTV made headlines when one of the network's reporters was killed in the Swat Valley in northern Pakistan. The media watchdog group Reporters Without Borders has released a scathing review of what it calls the 12 enemies of the internet. Their report includes the usual suspects, such as Iran, Burma, and North Korea. The organization accused the countries of censoring online material and practicing, quote, systematic persecution of troublesome internet users, unquote. The organization also criticized several established democracies, such as Australia and South Korea, for their unnecessary use of internet monitoring, much of which is couched within anti-terror laws. 70 cyber dissidents are currently being held around the world over their activities on the net, with China being the worst offender. French President Nicolas Sarkozy is backing a 3 strikes and you're out net piracy law. The proposed law aims to create a new state surveillance agency to monitor internet users online. Those caught downloading pirated material 3 times will have their net access blocked by the authorities. The French government has been accused of acting like Big Brother, and internet civil liberties groups have responded by organizing thousands of websites across the country to black out their web pages in protest. Once again, a cartoon has caused offense amongst Muslims. This time, it's on the net, and its authors are Israeli. Ahmed and Salim is styled along the lines of the American satirical cartoon show South Park, and episode 1 got 40,000 hits in its first week online. In the episode, Ahmed and Salim make a botched attempt to bomb an Israeli bus. The show's 2 young authors, Paz and Traeger, say they're making fun of terrorists, not of Muslims. The cartoon does come with a warning. If you're easily offended, it said, please don't watch the show. Among those who have watched and have been offended are some Arab governments who have blocked the cartoon on the web in their countries. We're back after the break with a report on the U.S. comedy network that took on a business news channel and won.